more complex as technology evolves, and the way attorneys capture and preserve that evidence is changing. We look at innovative ways to capture screen activity on computers during a deposition, how to use paperless exhibit tools, looked at the actual process of capturing the testimony itself. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to examine how the actual record is captured, preserved, and how that landscape is changing, or how it will affect your cases. So, let's get started. The goal of any deposition is to take what is said here in the deposition room and ensure that it is certified transcript. A transcript that can later be used in trial or otherwise. Traditionally, this has been done by a stenographic reporter. An individual authorized to put the witness under oath and then trained to write verbatim in stenography what is said during the deposition. What's interesting is, to most people, what happens between when the reporter writes at the deposition and when the final certified transcript is delivered to their office is a bit of a mystery. So before we look at new capture methods that are emerging, let's look at the stenographic reporter's workflow. So what exactly does a reporter do? Well, here is a timeline of a typical deposition, the whole process. I'm going to take you through step by step. So the certificate is printed out and bound. On an interesting side note, many firms are receiving their certified copies electronically, meaning the only paper that ever is used is for the original transcript, which I think is a very green approach. And then lastly, the final transcript with the exhibits is packed up and shipped out to you. And that's the entire process. That happens from the moment the proceeding is, called in to, when you actually receive the transcript in your hand. Like a great system. So why would we need to change anything? Well, there are a variety of factors that are driving this change, and we're going to look at those now. The first one is technology. I'm sure you all know that the pace of change in technology is unrelenting. And I love to illustrate this by showing these two photos here, just how much and how fast things change. by 2018/2019. Well, is there a tightening? Indeed there is. To the study's credit, they projected a gap of 5,100 reporters, and they were remarkably accurate. A big factor driving this decrease is that older stenographic reporters are retiring, and not enough new reporters are taking their place. You may have with more people opting for the college route, there are less students to learn skilled trades like construction, healthcare, etc. And of course, stenographic reporting. Matters worse as there are less students, schools close down, meaning it's even harder to learn stenography, making it a vicious cycle. 4 states are being hit the hardest by this shortage: California, Texas, Illinois, and New York. And really shouldn't come as a big surprise, as those are the largest legal/litigation markets in the country. As we get into the code section of the CLE, I realize there are probably people from all 50 states on this CLE, but unfortunately we don't have enough time to go through all 50 states, so I'm just going to focus on these 4 as they're the ones feeling the most pressure. But keep in mind that a lot of states are going to be very similar. And this is something that the industry is really grappling with. The DRA is the Deposition Reporters Association of California. Commented about, or said about this shortage, that there is an unprecedented shortage of reporters in California. Other methods of capturing the record are being explored as a result. And that's what we're going to look at today. What other options do we have available? Stenographic reporters is definitely the gold standard as far as taking a deposition and recording the record. But as there are less and less, what other options do we have to ensure that cases move forward? And not to mention, we're ethically obligated to be aware of the change. If you look at the ABA model rules, it says to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill, a lawyer should keep abreast of the changes in the law and its practice, including the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. Now, what's interesting is in a lot of our CLEs, we focus on the risk factor. We look at data security risks, things like that. But in this CLE, we're actually going to look at how modern technology can benefit, the attorney and ensure that, you're able to take your depositions. And really what's important to remember is that we see a change in the industry, that it is no longer a one-size-fits-all kind of model. It is because of the unfortunate shortage, there's just not enough reporters to cover every deposition. So varying depositions may need alternative capture methods, and that's what we're going to look at. And I really think of it as the same way that law firms have embraced technology when dealing with documents. They need to also expand their horizons and look at new capture methods. I mean, many firms you go into today, while they're not always 100% paperless, more and more people are trying to get rid of those stacks and stacks of documents and move everything digital. So we're really, like I said, going to focus on the benefits of the technology in today's CLE. So, that said, what are available ways to capture testimony? There are a variety of ways. You can use handwriting, just a pen and paper, and shorthand that way, probably or definitely the oldest method. You can use a stenographic machine, which you're probably all familiar with, the second one there, the gold standard, if you will. You can use digital recording equipment, and we will talk more about that in a moment. You can also use a mask reporter, and this is interesting. They use that mask you see down there at the bottom, the 1, 2, 3, 4th one, to actually repeat all the testimony that's said, and the computer then voice transcribes it into a transcript. And then the last one you see there is you can get rid of the reporter entirely and just stick an analog audio recording and record it, much like how a lot of courtrooms were set up. audio equipment. The pros here: high consistency, redundant backups, and highly efficient. Some of the cons: there's no real time yet, and there's no rough drafts yet. And we'll dig into that one in a minute. Mask reporting is a great option. Some of the pros is that real time is available, rough is available. The big con, can be a little distracting, having somebody repeat everything, but I think the bigger one is that it is far less common. It's even less, there's even far, far fewer than stenographic reporters, so it's just not a viable solution. How about analog recording, getting rid of the reporter entirely? The only pro here is that it's inexpensive, but everything else is horrible. This is the worst way to do it, and I think this is why recordings have gotten a real bad name. These are set up in courtrooms. They're unmonitored, meaning who knows what it's recording. If people are not close to the microphone, you don't know. There's no speaker identification. If you've been in a court and you've had to go over court transcripts or court video recording, you know this is a bad way to do it. So we won't even spend any time talking, about that one. So if we look at the chart on all the available options that you could potentially use for a proceeding, clearly stenographic reporting has worked very well for our industry and will continue to be the go-to solution. However, when there are not reporters available, what other options are on the table? Well, handwriting, I don't think so. We see a bunch of X's there. Mask reporting, we see a bunch of green checks, but we still have that problem of being a very, very low availability. Really, in my mind, it seems like the best one to augment the stenographic reporter population when they are not available is digital reporting. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're really going to dig into a lot on what digital reporting is and some of the rules and procedures behind it. But before we do, why don't we jump in and take a look at what exactly is a digital reporter. And there has been a lot of rumors and things around that, but we'll kind of clear up exactly what a digital reporter does. A digital reporter is a trained professional deposition officer, usually a notary in the state, or a notary in the state, not usually, they are, that captures the testimony using digital audio equipment rather than stenography. So they use high-quality, modern digital audio equipment. The digital reporter will individually mic each participant to ensure that every word is recorded clearly. They actually record individuals on their own track, so they can later go back and single out voices that can be isolated for more accurate transcription. New technology has made digital reporting not only a viable solution, but one that is, nearly on par. Separately, there is a backup. This is so important to remember, that there is not just one recording. There is a separate backup system, so it is redundant. So if something was to happen to this equipment, the deposition still would be recorded. Also, a digital reporter will swear in the witness and mark any exhibits that you may have. And then last and most important, their job is to certify that everything was transcribed faithfully. So you can see, as far as the setup, there isn't a huge difference in the setup as far as a stenographer. I don't even realize that it's not a stenographer there, since they have the computer, they're taking copious notes and making sure that everything is recorded. So that's a little bit about what a digital reporter is. But let's now take a look at some of the rules and procedures behind it. We want to make sure that we're actually able to utilize these transcripts in our cases. Our goal and our purpose for this section is not to provide legal advice, but to draw your attention to the various code sections for your own interpretation, which may align with our perspective or it may not. Regardless, we found that these code sections are often not known by attorneys, which is why we want to bring them up and present them today. As I mentioned, we do not have time to cover all 50 states, so we're just going to focus in on the 4 states and the federal, which would apply to everybody here, California, Texas, Illinois, and New York. And I want to say, as we go through this section, we don't have all the answers. This is an important topic, though, that is directly impacting the industry, and I think it needs to be discussed, and I think it's why it's such a great CLE topic. The changes are so new that in most states the code has not even caught up to the changing labor pool, let alone the technology. So let's start with federal. If we look at the federal rules of civil procedure, in particular Rule 30, these are the most expansive of the code sections, in which each capture method is equally weighted. There's not a preference of one over the other. And you can see there, the party who notices the deposition must state in the notice the method of recording the testimony. Unless the court orders otherwise, testimony may be recorded by audio, audio-visual, or stenographic means. So you'll see there, we've actually highlighted it. And additionally, if we read in Section 5A, the deposition officer is someone who is authorized to administer oaths either by federal law or by the law in the place of examination. So this could refer to a stenographer as well as a notary. You'll also notice that the parties can stipulate as to the deposition officer. I think a takeaway from this in the states we're about to discuss is that alternative options to stenographic reporters are already provided in the relevant code sections, and that it's important for you to consider what is stated in your notice of deposition, as well as the integral power of the ability to stipulate on available other options, for instance, digital reporting. Okay, let's now take a look at California. This is the state facing the biggest shortfall of stenographic reporters. In California, the relevant code section is the Code of Civil Procedure, Section 2025.330. You'll notice from this section that the stenographic method is the default method of preserving the deposition record, which is still by far the predominant and preferred method by which a proceeding would be reported. However, what is not often known is that the section also provides for alternative methods to preserve testimony. As prefaced in Section B, the parties can agree to alternative methods of preserving testimony, which is outlined in Section C, providing the party noticing the deposition may also record the testimony by audio or video technology if the notice of deposition stated an intention also to record the testimony by either of those methods, or if all the parties agree that the testimony may be recorded by those methods. So again, we can see a stipulation can take care of that. If we move over to Texas here, Texas actually has a provision in their code for non-stenographic recording of a deposition. It's the same thought process, though. Under Texas Code of Civil Procedure, it actually differentiates and specifically states the process by one goes about noticing and utilizing non-stenographic reporting methods to preserve testimony. Again, it is in the content of the notice of deposition that is central to providing notice to all parties of this intention, or at the very least, reserving the right to utilize a non-stenographic reporter. Hopefully you're catching a trend here of updating the notice. New York is interesting in that technically a reporter does not even need to be certified in that state. But that said, I'm going to stick with the same analysis we did in the other states. Rule 3113 states that a deposition may be taken before any of the following persons: a person authorized by the laws of the state to administer oaths. So for New York, according to RPP 301, notary public is also included in that. So as you can see, the testimony may be recorded by stenographic or other means. Finally, let's take a look at Illinois. This is a very clear example. Rule 26.2 states that notice must be given if you intend to record the testimony by audio-visual device. While I imagine this refers specifically to videotaping, I think it also can cover digital reporting. The same rule goes on to explain in this section, the officer before whom the deposition is to be taken shall put the witness under oath, and this can be done just like in New York by a notary public. So I hope you can see a clear trend here with just this small sample size, that digital reporting can be used in most states with a simple addition to your notice and a potential short stipulation on the record. Obviously, though, every state is different, so I hope this gives you some direction. What changes, I kept mentioning changes to the notice. What changes would we actually make to a notice? Again, I want to reiterate that we are a court reporting company, and your deposition notices are your responsibility and the responsibility of the attorneys in your office. However, I wanted to share some of the ways we have seen people modify their notice simply by adding this line here, reserving the right. It goes without saying that you should check with your local rules and relevant code sections, but this is what we have seen firms do and be successful. The same way that firms used to add the real time into their boilerplate notice, we see a lot of firms adding this in there as well, so they at least have that option come time to deposition. If there are no stenographic reporters available and you still need to go forward, you'll be able to use a digital reporter. Then I mentioned the all-powerful stipulations as we looked at some of the states. And much like your notice, we're not giving you a script, rather just assembling what we've seen in the field. But this is a stipulation that we've seen put on the beginning of the deposition on the record that's been effective here. So I'll just leave that up on the screen there for a moment. Another interesting code section which may exist in other states, hence we suggest you look it up, is the type of authority is the Code of Civil Procedure section 2016.3, which provides, unless the court orders otherwise, the parties may, by written stipulation, modify the procedures provided by this title for any method of discovery permitted under this section. So just a little bit about the code. Again, we recommend you look at your specific state's code. That may add a little more light to that. All right, we're going to now go into my favorite section. With any change in an industry, there's always a lot of, rumors flying around. Some things true, some things not true. So I thought I'd take a cue from my favorite TV show, Mythbusters, and we're going to call this section Mythbusters Testimony Edition. We're going to take a look at some of the myths and rumors and things that we have heard out in the field and see if there is any truth to those. And then we'll take a little question break right afterwards. Number 1, digital reporting has a slow turnaround time. Well, this one is busted. This is false. Digitally reported proceedings have the same turnaround time as stenographically reported proceedings. In fact, with the ability to distribute the work to multiple transcribers, digital reporting actually has the potential to be faster than other methods of reporting. Mask reporting is only used in the military. Well, this one is false, busted. While it's not as common as stenographic reporters, mask reporting is used in many states, particularly in the Southeast. Just unfortunately not enough for the whole nation. Our next one here, oops, I clicked ahead. Well, you saw the answer to it, but this one, all stenographic reporters can provide real-time. This is not true. This is busted. Interactive real-time requires a highly skilled stenographic reporter and special equipment to provide the real-time feed to attorneys. So it is not something that is guaranteed. All stenographic reporters are certified. Well, let's see if you remember this one, because I did mention it earlier. This one is busted. It is false. While the vast majority are certified, some states, for example, New York, don't actually require court reporters to have a certification. This is a big one. Digital reporting has too many inaudible portions. And this one, I think, is mostly the responsibility of unattended analog recording setups like in courtrooms. Many courtrooms throughout the country decided to get rid of reporters and just instead install a recorder, like a subpar recording system. And of course, when it came back when it came time to transcribe these recordings, it was found that there were tons of inaudible portions, no speaker identifications, times when the technology wasn't even working, period. And it caused lots of problems, mistrials. I mean, it was been a mess. This is very different. That setup is very different than digital reporting. So this is actually busted when it specifically refers to digital reporting. With the current technology and the use of more sensitive and accurate microphones in conjunction with the trained technician, which is so key, there has to be somebody there running it. The results are far better in clarity with fewer inaudible portions, and you have somebody there who's able to monitor it. So I think this is a huge, huge, huge one. Do not confuse digital reporting with the subpar setups that you've seen in a lot of courtrooms. Those are totally not good. Not worth it. There are no readbacks with digital reporting. Want to hear that again? Well, with answer again, a stenographic reporter would just look at their notes and read it back. But how does a digital reporter do that? Well, I actually think this is kind of cool. They do what's called a playback, where they actually play back that portion of the testimony in the actual voices of the people who are asking and answering the questions. I kind of think of it like TiVo for a deposition. You can just rewind it and replay it. So it does enable you to do readbacks. It's just slightly different, and I actually think kind of cool that way. Another one we hear is that there are state limitations on using digital reporting. Now, we did not cover all 50 states, but I'm hoping that you can generalize from what we covered that this is, in fact, busted or false. Many states enable a simple addition to your deposition notice and or a stipulation by all parties on the record to enable the use of alternative capture methods. Here's another big one. There's nobody in the room. It's just a recorder, and that's it. By now, I hope you all know that this one is busted. And this is also a really good point to bring up, is that not all digital reporters are created equal. There are very low-cost providers out there that are doing probably what I would think is a bad idea of just putting a recorder out there with no professional officiant or anything like that. And you need to stay clear of those. Those are going to give you the same quality as the courtroom. But a proper digital reporter would be a professional officiant in the room, swearing people in, monitoring the equipment, etc. This is so key. If they just send you a recorder for your deposition or like set up an iPad or something, find a new one. That is not a good option. Alternative capture methods have security issues. This, given the sensitive information contained in many depositions, it is critical that no matter what the capture method, it is secure every step of the way. And we see this with stenographic reporters. Well, is it the same with digital reporting? It is. A proper digital reporter's process should meet or exceed all industry standard security policies. This includes end-to-end encryption, HIPAA and PII compliance, just to name a few. So it needs to be just as secure as a stenographic reporter's workflow. Alternative capture methods are less expensive. Well, like I said, you may have heard of some super low-cost providers out there where I think they just set up an iPad at your deposition or something, but I would be leery of that. Generally, those are not meeting all the requirements that we have been talking about. Because, in fact, a proper digital reporter is going to do all the work that's done to coordinate, manage, record, transcribe, securely transfer, store. All of that is the same. The only thing that's changed is the method of capture, but the skill and professionals involved are just as valuable to the process. Which takes us into our next one. Digital reporters are not professional. And this is a worry to some attorneys, and rightfully so. I mean, you're going to have your client there, opposing counsel, maybe an expert. I mean, a deposition is no place for an untrained, unprofessional technician. And thankfully, with a proper digital reporter, this is busted. A proper digital reporting agency or company provides vets every digital reporter, ensuring that the highest level of professionalism is met, and in addition to industry certifications and technical savviness. So very big key one. And then our last myth, alternatively captured transcripts are not as accurate. If you learn nothing else from this CLE, I hope that you take away that this one is busted. Current technology provides for more sensitive and more accurate microphones. In conjunction with trained technicians and individually mic'd participants, this results in better clarity recordings, ensuring you get an accurate record. So, why don't we go ahead and take a question break here before we dive into our next section. So hopefully I have my colleague Rebecca on the line. Is there any questions, Rebecca? And keep in mind, if we miss your question, we will address it later on.
You know, Mike, we haven't gotten any questions yet.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Either I'm doing a great job teaching or everyone's asleep. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
All right. Well, then we'll truck on ahead. Which takes us into our next section here. I keep mentioning about, not all digital reporting providers being created equal. You have various levels of, quality and service, and depending on the agency. So this section is just things to remember, or questions for your vendor, things to think about when you're looking for a digital reporter. So the first one is, are there individual mics per person? This one is imperative. If you want a clean recording, if you don't want things to be missed, every person has to have their own lapel microphone, not just an iPad setup, not just a video camera. It's really got to be key. Is there someone in the room, and are they professional? I think we've talked a lot about this, but it is going to be critical. You don't want an unmonitored recording. Then you'll be back in the same with courtrooms. You want somebody there monitoring it, swearing people in, running it like a professional deposition. It's important to confirm the turnaround time. Some of the things we see other low-cost providers doing is ship the recordings offshore for transcription. Not only leads to lower quality, but can also lead to longer turnaround times, even security issues. So you would definitely want to ask that. Do I need language for my notice? They may not always have the answer for you. I mean, ultimately, it is you and the attorney's responsibility. But one of the things that we're able to do is see a lot of notices, and we can kind of share what we have seen out and about. So I think that's a good question to have. How are readbacks handled? You want to make sure that they have the ability to do a readback, or in digital reporting sense, a playback. And you also want to make sure that the speakers are identified properly, and so that everything will be transcribed properly. Do they have redundant systems? In my opinion, this one is critical, actually, for any reporter. We know that computers break. It happens to everybody. So they need to have multiple recording devices so that if something happens to the main system, you're not going to lose your record. You need a completely separate and redundant system. And so some of the low-cost providers I do not think are doing this. You just want to make sure that there is redundant systems in your deposition. Will an oath be administered? This one may vary depending on what you need and depending on your local rules, but it's important to know that the digital reporter will be able to administer an oath. Excuse me. Ugh. So they want to, we want to make sure that they're a notary in the state where the deposition is occurring. Which kind of takes us into our next one. Are they a notary? I think is a good question to ask. And then the last question is about security. Is there end-to-end security with the transcripts? And, depositions may contain social security numbers, addresses, bank account information, health information. I mean, the list goes on and on. You've got to make sure that it is being handled carefully every step of the way. Whether it's from coming off of a stenographer's machine or a digital reporter's machine, you want to make sure that your provider has the latest and greatest security so none of your data is floating out there, putting you or your clients at risk. So while that's not an entirely comprehensive list, I hope that at least gets the conversation started with you and your deposition reporting provider to ensure that any deposition you have, no matter what the method, goes smoothly. All right, in this section, we have talked about different types of capture methods, and I thought it would be useful to show you which type of capture method is best applicable. Now, again, the gold standard is a stenographic reporter. And of course, if one is available, that's going to be the first choice every single time. But in those instances when one is not available, which proceedings are best for stenographic versus can work with digital reporting? So we're going to play a few games here and show you, or a few scenarios here that show you that, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of industry any longer. So let's go through them. So in our first scenario here, this is an intellectual property case involving the design of websites and a customer checkout process. A lot of technical terms, at least 5 attorneys in the room, two of whom would like a real-time feed from the reporter. Well, this one is the best fit for a stenographic reporter. And the big giveaway there was the real-time feed. If this was a deposition reporter, a digital reporter, you would not be able to get that real-time feed. So in this instance, stenographic reporter. Our second scenario, a simple one here, examination under oath. The adjuster would like to conduct several of these in a day. Well, this is actually a really good fit for a digital reporter. Because these are pretty straightforward depositions, not involving a lot of technical terms or complicated things, and most likely no need for real-time, a digital reporter is a good fit, particularly because they can just do back-to-back throughout the day, as many as they need. Our next scenario is a workers' compensation case. Half Foods, get it, is being sued by an injured employee. The deposition will be short and routine with no need for a rough transcript or a real-time feed. Well, this would be a perfect scenario if there are no stenographic reporters available to use a digital reporter. Again, because there's no real-time or rough, I think it would be a really good fit for a digital reporter. Scenario number 4, this is a business litigation case in which a deposition of an employee to establish a chain of custody on some exhibits. However, at 5 p.m. the night before, you finally heard back from the employee regarding their availability. They said tomorrow's the only day they can be deposed, tomorrow or nothing. Of course, because of the labor shortage, there are no stenographic reporters available on such short notice. So, what do you do for this scenario? Well, if you want that deposition to go forward, I think a great alternative would be a digital reporter. While you may not be able to have real-time or rough, you're going to at least get that deposition taken care of. Here we go. In this one, Piggy Bank, or what did I have there? Banks R Us versus Piggy Bank. The deposition will be of a financial expert. It will cover complex topics. This is an important witness, so there will be at least 8 attorneys in the room. Well, this one is definitely a really good fit for a stenographic reporter. And really the key is those 8 attorneys in the room. If the potential for anyone to order rough or real time, you want to make sure that you have that stenographic reporter available. And then our last scenario, a forest fire in which the power company is being sued for starting the largest wildfire in California history. And attorneys are not sure if they will need a rough transcript. And so for this one, particularly because they're not sure, I would recommend a stenographic reporter. So you can see a variety, and I hope this exercise helps guide you in requesting the right type of reporter for the right job. And in actuality, it really shouldn't be your responsibility. It should be the reporting agency's responsibility to guide you in the best direction. But that said, I think it is useful for you as the attorney to know ultimately, who and how your deposition will be taken. And it's good to know which is the best fit for each scenario. And really, the biggest thing I hope you take away from this last section is that it is not a one-size-fits-all kind of service any longer. It really depends on the availability and the type of proceedings. All right. Let's now move on in our closing 15 minutes here to some of the logistics around this. Because this is new, I thought it would be helpful for you to see how these rooms set up, how the actual setups are conducted, and so you know what to expect. So first, let's take a look at a stenographic deposition. This one you're probably all familiar with. Generally, you have your witness. Next to them, you sit the reporter so they can swear them in and hear clearly. Across from the witness is the questioning counsel, and then all the other attorneys kind of file in down the table. When there's an exhibit, the questioning attorney will give it to the stenographic reporter, who will then apply an exhibit sticker and then give it to the witness, and then you can pass out courtesy copies to everybody else in the room. If there is a videographer needed, if it's a videotape deposition, everyone kind of just scoots down, and the videographer is generally right across from the witness to get a nice clear shot, and then everybody else, like I said, kind of just files in down the table. Okay, well, that was a stenographic reporting setup you're probably familiar with, but what about a digital reporter setup? Well, let's take a look. Well, you have your witness there, then you have your digital reporter sitting where the stenographic reporter would be, and then everything else is pretty much exactly the same. If there's an exhibit, the questioning attorney would give it to the digital reporter, who would mark that exhibit and then give it to the witness, and then, just like before, that attorney can hand out courtesy copies to all the different parties. If there is a videographer, which you can use a videographer in addition to a digital reporter, same exact thing. Everyone just kind of scoots down, and the videographer sets up right across from the witness. Now, I like to put this last one in here, virtual depositions. This one is become more and more popular as people don't want to have to travel for depositions. So I thought I would show you the setup for that. So here we have our deposition setting up. It can be either type of reporter. So in this instance, I just wrote reporter. Now, with a virtual deposition, though, not everybody's in the same room. In fact, they're usually spread out across the country, if not around the world. Now, generally, the reporter is with the witness, wherever the witness is, and that is so that they can swear them in and also, help them set up the equipment, things like that. But it doesn't have to be, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So to conduct the virtual deposition, everybody has a computer in front of them. People who want to be on camera, for instance, the witness and the questioning counsel have little webcams you can see on the top of their computer. But then other people in the virtual deposition, for instance, the co-counsel, the client, and opposing counsel, are in just listen-only mode. So they're just watching. Actually, excuse me, the opposing counsel is on camera as well. But the client and the co-counsel are in listen-only mode, which means they're just watching what's going on, which is a great way if you want to have somebody sit in on a deposition without actually having to be there. A huge use case we see for this is partners wanting to sit in on associates' depositions. They may not want to have to travel to go there, but they want to keep an eye on it, have them dial in via listen-only mode, and they're going to be able to just watch what's going on. This is what it actually will look like for the attorneys logged into their screen. You can see the big one there. The big picture is the witness, and then beneath are any of the other attorneys or parties dialed in. If they're on camera, they can be on listen-only mode. And because this is something customary, we actually build in the real-time feed there so you can actually see what the reporter is writing. But the other nice thing is that the reporter doesn't technically have to be with the witness. If you stipulate otherwise, again, that all-powerful stip, they can be anywhere. For instance, one scenario I was helping, I skipped ahead of myself here. How do we deal with documents? And then I'll finish that scenario. How do we share exhibits if everyone is virtual? Well, you will have to use paperless exhibits and some sort of paperless exhibit tool, but in that instance, usually the questioning attorney will upload his exhibit or her exhibit, and then copies will be pushed out to everybody, including the witness, using that digital exhibit platform. But now let's talk about that other setup. I kind of got ahead of myself here, but the witness it was stipulated that the questioning, the two attorneys would be in our Irvine, California conference room with the reporter, and the witness would be somewhere in the middle of India calling in from their home. There was no way that the attorneys could get there and back before trial, so they stipulated and that they were able to take the deposition right in the conference room in Irvine while the witness was somewhere in the middle of India dialing in from their home computer. So as you can see, virtual opens up a whole lot of possibilities. It's definitely something that has exploded in popularity. We've done these as far as, like I said, India, Australia, different war-torn zones when maybe people don't want to go there, which I don't blame them. We've also seen these as close as one conference room to the next because it was a divorce case that was so hostile they couldn't be in the same room at the same time. So a lot of different uses for this, but definitely something to kind of keep in your back pocket. You don't want to have to travel. Well, that takes us to our last 10 minutes. Let's see, are there any questions, Rebecca?
We do have a few questions. So,
okay, great.
One question we have is, does the ordering firm get an audio copy of the testimony?
That is a great question, and they do not. It works very similar to the way the stenographic reporters will generally record the proceedings off using their machine just as a way to kind of go back and check things. It is their work product, and it is not available. Good question, though.
We also had a question about that oftentimes this person needs to set up like a court reporter for a state court hearing in California. So have digital reporters ever been used for court hearings?
Ooh, that is a great question, and I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I don't want to make a guess. So what I will do is I will check with our in-house counsel and find out, what we have done around that. So I will. If you could take a note, Rebecca, of who that was, I will respond to them directly once I get an answer. Good question, though.
Yes, I will do that. And what about? Sorry. So can virtual depositions also be taken by a digital reporter?
Yes, great question, and yes, they can. You would simply have the digital reporter in place of the stenographic reporter. Now, keep in mind you wouldn't be able to do the real time like I showed in that screenshot, but that's purely optional anyway, and you would be able to use the digital reporter. So, good question.
Okay, we have a lot of other. One question is, how is digital reporting being transcribed?
If I understand the question correctly, it's generally just done with a transcriptionist, and then this certificate in the end, you have a certificate of the digital reporter, and then you also have the certificate of the transcriptionist to ensure that it has been transcribed accurately. While you look through, okay. Yeah. While you look through those, I wanted to leave everybody with a few resources. So, we covered the 5 sections of code. I've included those links on the screen. To be honest, if you just Google them, it's really a lot easier. What we recommend too is just Google your state and deposition proceedings, or and usually it'll find it up. Or it'll pull it up, but here are the actual links if you'd like them. And then these I really like to put up here. So one of the things that we spend a lot of energy and effort in is fostering more stenographic reporters. We work very closely with the National Court Reporter Association, being a platinum donor. There's also the American Association of Electronic Reporters and Transcribers. That's the association for digital reporters. But then there's another one down there that I haven't talked about called Project Steno. And this is something that is near and dear to our heart. This is to help get more students into stenography. So if you know people, young people, or people looking for a career change, or you yourself are interested in being a stenographic reporter, if you go to projectsteno.org, you can learn a lot more about where to go to school, how to learn it, and we're very active in that. So we're doing everything we can to increase the number of stenographic reporters out there, but in the meantime, we're also realist in ensuring that your depositions are covered, and that really was the goal of today's presentation, to look at the available options that are out there. And so to close, I thought we'd bring it full circle and take a look at the process again. We'll take a look at the same thing we did with the up there you see at the top, the stenographic reporter, but now let's take a look at the digital reporter's process, and we'll kind of compare the two. So first you have both the reporter accepting the assignment. Now, most digital reporters are also independent contractors, and they have a mobile app that they would be able to accept the assignment. Day of the deposition, it would either be written in steno on a stenographic machine, or it would be digitally recorded by a digital reporter. And then after that, while the reporter's rough transcript goes to a scopist, the digital recording from the digital reporter would go to a transcriber, who would then transcribe the proceeding. Once both of those are finished, they're sent back to the respective reporter to ensure that everything has been transcribed accurately. Those are then securely sent into the reporting company's office where those files are created, all the various file types, things like that, including printing out and binding the official transcript and the certified copies, and then those are put into a box and shipped out to you. And so you can see that there isn't a huge difference on what on the process. And I think it's really important to remember that at the end you still receive a certified transcript. A transcript that will serve as a verbatim record of what happened in the deposition room, which I think really brings us full circle. The purpose of a deposition is not to focus on the method on how it's captured, but rather the content of that transcript and how it will help you tell your story, whether it's in a motion or ultimately even in trial. The landscape in the industry are changing. We hope this class brought some of the aspects of that change to light for you. Like any industry, there will be an adjustment period, but then I'm sure everybody will return to business as usual. Until then, we will keep a very close eye on this topic and continue to bring you classes like this that will help all of us adapt in this ever-changing field. Thank you all very much for attending today's CLE. Now, don't go ahead and close just yet. I'm going to jump to the next slide here with a little housekeeping, and then we will do that survey. Some of the states do require a CLE code. Now, this is not the course number or anything like that. This isn't what you're going to apply, on your CLE paperwork. This is basically to prove that you were paying attention. So if your state requires it, the CLE code is update notice. As soon as I am done here, I'm going to close this webinar. That survey should pop up. If the survey does not pop up, go ahead and email us at webinar@veritext.com. So right there in the middle, hopefully you see that. Also, after 48 hours, if you don't receive anything, you can go ahead and email webinar@veritext.com. Thank you all so much for attending today's webinar. We hope to see you on a future webinar. And if you have any other questions, go ahead and email us. And like I said, if there was any questions we missed today, I'll go back through the whole question pod and address those directly to you. Thank you all very much, and have a wonderful day.